We encourage you to take a look. The live stream it is live streamed. It just came up. All right. We encourage you to take a look at the conference website that you see there. There's more information about other sessions that you can get to there, and also the conference code of conduct. We are using the hashtag LD42022 on Twitter, so please take advantage of that. Please use the Slack invite link that you see to join Slack, as this will allow you to continue conversations that begin in these sessions in another venue. We also offer a tech support channel in Slack for conference technology assistance. But if you encounter difficulties during this session in particular, please feel free to go ahead and raise your hand or drop a note into the Zoom channel. You can go to Slack as well, but we'd like to help you out as fast as we can so we can keep you moving forward in this. During this session, if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that. If I can't answer it on the way through, we'll answer them at the end in the Q&A. All right, so let me introduce you to your speakers. Our presenters are members of the linked data team in the Cataloging and Metadata Services Department at the University of Washington Libraries in Seattle. Crystal Clements, Science Cataloger, is the MARC21 Bibliographic to RDA, LRM, RDF project manager and contributes to the mapping. Chunhei Lee, Humanities and Media Cataloger, contributes to the mapping. And Theo Gerontakos, head of the Metadata and Cataloging Initiatives Unit, provides administrative support to the project, contributes to the mapping, and leads the data transformation. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
I'll go ahead and share my screen.
All right. And there we are.
Okay. So as the title says, we're aspiring to expand the foundation for RDA's linked data. And we're doing that through a project called Mapping MARC21 Bibliographic to RDA, LRM, RDF. What I'm going to do, I'm going to lead off this talk. I'm going to talk about what were they thinking when they launched this project at UW Libraries. So some of the foundations, and even some of the foundations of this project. So that would start by telling you that we have a linked data team at University of Washington Libraries that Carrie already alluded to. We have 7 people on the team, and for the last few years, and we do some other things, but our main focus has been RDA and the new RDA that's aligned with the IFLA library reference model as expressed in using resource description framework, the RDF. And our premise for this RDA focus has been pretty simple, maybe simplistic, and we've even been accused of being too binary, whatever that means. But I think we have a premise that's worth testing. So what's the premise? It's that RDA data can be represented most accurately using the RDA ontology. I mean, there's a lot of other things we want to do too, like, for example, test RDA's fitness to support various research efforts when it's expressed as linked data. However, the new RDA implementations are planned, one in MARC and then also in the BIBFRAME environment. Our idea is, how about RDA in RDA? And when we say RDA and RDA, that's RDA linked data, and we're proposing to call that RDA/LRM/RDA. And so what we want to do is we want to move towards modern metadata, right? And MARC hasn't been appropriate for modern metadata. Probably everybody here knows that. A couple of reasons for that. It's inadequate for entity-based description, or, if you like, linked data. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. And obviously, we all know that there are too many text strings in MARC, and there's many other things too. So with entity-based description, then the thing that we want to go toward, and why we do these projects, is that we want to go towards a metadata world that is not record-based. So we want to make series of assertions about entities. Entities, of course, are things, people, companies, places. And we aspire to describe things using other things, and we aspire to assign unique identifiers to every thing and entity. Many of you know the linked data principles too. In library data practice, we've created records. We usually do it with a manifestation that's in a particular format, an audio recording, a book, a DVD. And then we create a record with an identifier for the record, and maybe other identifiers in the record, but the requirement is that there's an identifier for the record, and in that record, we describe multiple entities in a single record. So we have that data. Why not just derive the entity-based descriptions from that? And of course, that's what our project, the new project, is going to be doing. But there are lots of problems with it. We're running right up against them. And a couple of them include, Paul Frank talked about this a couple days ago. When we have a subfield in the value, what entity exactly is being described? And then oftentimes the data that's combined in a MARC record is very difficult to recombine outside the MARC environment. I'll insert a personal wish here. I really wish that we would have a little more urgency in moving away from MARC records. Yeah. So a superficial example of what I'm talking about is, let's say we have a JPEG. It was derived from a photocopy of all things, and it's published in a digital library. Well, why a photocopy? Well, because we lost the photographic print, and we don't know who has the glass negative, but it's an important photograph, so we're going to go ahead and scan it and then publish it. So if we create a record, when we say, like, for example, just to name one property, a creator. Well, the creator of what? The creator of what thing? Obviously, most of the times we mean the creator of the original photograph, but there's also a creator of the photocopy, creator of the photographic print, etc. So in modern metadata, of course, we have descriptions of all the things, and we're much more precise in what we're describing now. And of course, when we isolate the entities and describe them and share that data, theoretically, there will be a greater quantity of metadata. So what we're looking at theoretically is higher quality, higher quantity. Okay, so the other environment that BIBFRAME is being implemented is BIBFRAME, right? And it seems tailor-made for entity-based description. It's often offered as a replacement for MARC, and it's a pretty good standard. I mean, one of my favorite things about BIBFRAME is that all the entities are typed, so you always know the class that it's an instance of that entity, and that's a great feature that they're very important in data sets. However, when you implement RDA in BIBFRAME, and this is one of the problems we had and why we wanted to go forward with what we do, is that a lot of RDA data gets lost in the BIBFRAME environment. And also there's havoc when the data models come together. For example, the absence of the expression entity alone wreaks havoc. And as probably everybody here knows, many RDA entity relationships are just not available in BIBFRAME in the data model. So our talk is expanding the foundation of RDA for RDA as linked data. So obviously we think there's a foundation for RDA as linked data. So I should be clear on what that is. It's what we call the RDA ontology, the element sets and the value vocabularies as represented in the RDA registry and in the RDA toolkit. And we say we want to expand that foundation in our project. So obviously we want to broaden the use of that foundation, we want to explore the use of that foundation. And in this MARC to RDA project, one of our main goals is to increase the quantity of data that makes use of that foundation. For us, the foundations of the foundations that I promised, we were early adopters of RDA a long time ago, in the early 2000s, right? And that was, of course, in the MARC environment. We analyzed and commented on BIBFRAME 1.0. We'd like to think we were instrumental in getting improvements of BIBFRAME 2. We've been doing joint BIBFRAME RDA explorations since at least 2012, at least 10 years. Somewhere around 2015, 2016, we started to feel like, well, why isn't RDA, LRM, RDF our data of record? And why don't we use that rich data and output other formats as needed? So that would follow, we could therefore have our base data as the richest data, and derivatives would follow what Dublin Core Metadata Initiative calls the dumb down principle. Our hypothesis was this is worth testing. And so RDA gets implemented. It's been implemented for years, and the new RDA is going to get implemented. And meanwhile, the ontology gets overlooked. So we're wondering, well, who wants to not overlook this anymore? Who wants to go into a testing phase with RDA, LRM, RDF? One of the things we know, however, now is it's kind of big. It's a little large, and we can't do it alone. We've completed a number of projects, and we got what we want. We did what we wanted to do, what we set out to do, but they were still partial by nature, and because they're not being adequately sustained, I would call them ephemeral. And we would like this project, MARC RDA, to be more complete and sustained into the future. At the present time, we have some excellent collaborators. Gordon Dunsire is with the project. Sofia Zapunidou from National Library of Greece is with us. Laura Akerman from Emory University. Sita Bagwandine from Royal Library of Netherlands. And of course, Crystal Clements is here. She's our project manager. And then the remaining staff on the project is from UW Library. And of course, we welcome additional participants, and Crystal's going to talk about that. So what is this testing phase? In this project, what we're looking at is we don't want to get more RDA, LRM, RDF data. We also, in addition to that, in the bigger picture of our projects, we want more maps and alignments between RDA and other data models. And of course, much of that is already done in the RDA registry. If you go to the tools menu, and then you look at the maps and alignments, you'll see a lot of maps and alignments. In fact, that's where we started this project. We took the RDA to MARC alignment and we reversed it and used that as a starting point. So in the UW library, I said we've gone through several explorations in linked data as the foundation for this project, I would think. Sinopia resource templates were created for RDA and for BibFrame. And then our cataloging staff used those templates to create original RDA data. We also have a new project that's in progress right now to create new Sinopia templates to accommodate new RDA in Sinopia, and also to use a new syntax for creating resource templates in Sinopia. We did the RDA to BibFrame mappings that Paul Frank mentioned those the other day. Our first mapping was in 2016, and our main things we were trying to demonstrate that BibFrame wasn't ready for the BibCo standard record. And then the RDA mapping we did in 2020 was much more comprehensive. We mapped all the RDA 1A properties to BibFrame. And then we wrote a transformation code that used that mapping to convert RDA to BibFrame. The current project, like I said, is our MARC RDA, LRM RDF. It's cross-organizational. We're hoping others participate. We want it to be a comprehensive mapping, so every MARC field, one by one, we want to go through them. Has a potential for creating a large data set of RDA, LRM, RDF, even though it will be an imperfect data set, because it won't be like creating original RDA, LRM, RDF. And we're hoping to expand the tool set for analyzing RDA, LRM, RDF. We'll also produce a conversion script based on the mapping. Right now, it's going to be an XSLT 3.0. We'll see how that develops. And then, so once we're done, there's lots of things we can do. For example, we hopefully can show our premise that RDA data can be represented most accurately using the RDA ontology. Analyze that legacy data that was expressed as RDA, LRM, RDF. It's obviously going to need to be analyzed. Show how easy RDA is to query when it's expressed as linked data. See how well RDA, LRM, RDF supports user tests. So that we can even do some kind of metadata quality assessment. So obviously the data is going to need a home to do all that work in, but that's another project. We'll worry about that later. So let's talk about the actual project. Jung Hae is going to jump in here and I'll stop sharing. And this is what you came for.
So the mapping from MARC21 to RDA project was initiated in 2021 by the linked data team of the Cataloging and Metadata Services Department at the University of Washington Libraries. It was designed to create a robust mapping from the MARC21 bibliographic format to RDA RDF with a corresponding data conversion tool. Authority data is beyond the scope of this mapping. Currently, project roster consists of 13 people from 5 institutions, 10 from the US and 3 from Europe. So this project is a collaborative effort, which is cross-organizational and as well as international. Theo Gerontakos is the project manager, supervisor, and Crystal Clements is a project manager. Participants of this project serve as mapping contributor, conversion contributor, metadata consultant, or mapping consultant. We are currently holding weekly 90-minute working meetings via Zoom. We have been editing mappings in Google Sheets since May 2022. There are separate Google Sheets created for each MARC field. We initially edited our mappings in a CSV file in GitHub by pulling and pushing changes. But since we had data format issues when working in a CSV file, we finally decided to move to Google Sheets and back up the latest updates in GitHub. Python scripts are used for transforming from Google Sheets to CSV files and loading updated releases to GitHub. So the GitHub repository is used for our project management and homepage with general information, project roster, resources in our backup mapping files. It also includes meeting minutes, issues, and discussions, as well as a decisions index. Our working file was built based on the work of the RDA to MARC21 alignment task force with the RSC technical working group. This original work includes RDA element, mapping, and MARC21 bibliographic encoding string and recording method. This is an example of our completed mapping in Google Sheet. We adapted it from the RSC technical working group's RDA to MARC mapping by adding data and notes, such as MARC field label and MARC tag condition. Additional rows may need to be added to articulate multiple conditions. For our first meeting, we mapped MARC490 field to an RDA property as a group, as you can see here. So largely, two types of data or notes are included in the mapping table as follows. One type is existing data from MARC and RDA, such as MARC field label, RDA registry URI, and RDA registry label. The other type is marked with asterisk, which are conditions or notes added by mapping contributors. These include mapping status, MARC tag condition, justification for mapping, and transformation notes. So here is the simplified MARC21 to RDA, RDF mapping project workflow. In the initial stage, we created a MARC21 to RDA mapping CSV file based on the work by the RDA to MARC21 alignment task force. Currently, we are focusing on the mapping process. Mapping contributors identify and select a MARC field to map. While mapping from MARC to RDA, we discuss issues about how to deal with specific fields and subfields and make decisions through our weekly meetings and emails. Then we apply the decisions to our mapping. Once mapping for a MARC field is done, another mapping contributor reviews the mapping. While in the process of mapping and reviewing mapping in Google Sheets, we back up the latest updates in the GitHub repository with semi-automated pushes. And in the final stage, we will convert MARC to RDA mapping to RDF using SSLT. Now Crystal will tour our work environment.
Hello, I will be your tour guide today. So I'm going to jump right over to our GitHub repository where all of this exciting work happens. I want to start with our wiki. This has been sort of the project landing page for participants. Oh my goodness. Sorry about this. Okay, here we are. This is our little homepage. It's got a little about section with information just about the project. And we have got a series of links for contributing to the project and communicating, a list of resources that we found useful during our mapping work, and then a project roster with everybody's GitHub usernames. So in addition to this homepage, we've also been keeping track of our meeting minutes and posting them publicly so that everybody can see what we're talking about, what we're working on. I have not added our full meeting minutes from yesterday, but they are up to date up until yesterday. And then we're also doing an index of decisions that we've made that are based on, you know, our own judgment versus specific direction and guidance from RDA documentation or MARC documentation. So we have all of our sort of judgment-based decisions hanging out here, organized and hyperlinked, so that we can talk about them, refer back to them, and remain consistent in our mapping work, which is important to us. In addition to this wiki, we are using GitHub for project management, which has been kind of fun. We've got a project board. So I went through and made an issue for every single MARC field that needs to be mapped to RDA and put it in, and created issues for other chunks of work that need to be done. And then we have these columns where each piece of work can be moved to its appropriate place. So you can see we've got 259 things to do, 31 in progress, 28 awaiting review, 1 review in progress, and then 1 that's ready for being transformed, and 23 that are done. So we've gotten well underway, but there's a lot of work left to be completed. I can show you a little bit more about these issues. We've established some milestones for ourselves in this mapping to sort of organize our work. Our first milestone that we're trying to accomplish is to do map the entity or the elements that are included in the PCC's RDA BSR, the Bibliographic Standard Record, because those seem to be the most important and most useful things to map first to us. We'll move on to the PCC RDA CSR, so the Concert Standard Record, next. And then we're also simultaneously building a minimum viable product for data transformation, which is pretty exciting. Theo is heading up that work. And we've also added some various labels to make choosing issues easier. So hopefully this makes issues more navigable for project participants and people who want to take a look and see what we're doing. These are all publicly available. We've also got discussions over here for things that need a lot of intellectual consideration before we move them into the mapping. These are also public, and we welcome any input that anybody has. There's various categories of issues that need to be worked out in a way that functions for RDA and for MARC. Right, and then we've also got our code, as Chang'e and Theo were talking about. We've got a folder for instructions for the mapping, reference documents about data modeling that have been important, the MARC of Quality's RIMF mappings, which we refer to sometimes. And then these working documents have our transformation code for the automated process for moving things from Google Sheets into this folder. So these are the CSVs that hold our mappings as they exist right now. And they're not complete, but you can peruse them at your leisure and participate if you'd like. So in addition to our latest pushes, we have our Google Sheets working documents. And these are just internal documents that we are using to complete the mapping work. Just makes it easier. It's nice. It's nicely formatted. I'll show you the one that I've been working on. This is for the 700. So using Google Docs, I'm able to say, oh, we should delete this because it doesn't work. It's wrong. Or I can say, you know, I've taken my first pass at this, and this is what I think. I can hide columns if they're not relevant. There's a lot of columns like character position, which isn't relevant for the 700, but it is relevant for an 007. So I can hide columns that aren't relevant to me. Just makes it a lot easier to deal with, much more visually pleasing than dealing with a CSV file in a different format. So that is the quick tour of our project and our work. If you are interested in joining, we can always use more help. We could use more voices in the discussion section of our GitHub repository. We could use people bringing up issues if they see that we've done something wrong. And if you want to join our weekly meetings and become like a more like a mapping contributor, that would be excellent. Send me an email. My email's right here. Yeah, we welcome further collaboration from the community. And now we have time for questions and answers.
I'll go ahead, and one did come through right here at the end that I can go ahead and ask you, that says, you have Dutch and Greek participants. Do you have entity labels in Dutch and Greek too?
Our Dutch and Greek participants are participating in English. Bilingual people, at least bilingual. I don't know how many languages they speak.
Okay. Okay, this came through really quickly. Hang on just a second. There was a very large question, but there was a response about the about your response to the, I believe this is a same individual, so I believe that it's about the Dutch and Greek. It says, yes, of course, but if you'll implement these in a library system, you'd need the labels in a local language. I don't know if you had a response to that comment. There's a very large.
The RDA registry has RDA vocabularies available in many languages. So they are included. I can also respond to this comment by Joshua Henry. I'm sorry, what?
I was just looking at that.
Yeah. You know, the WEMI model and its incompatibility with BibFrame and the multitude of sort of workarounds that have been created by the Library of Congress or Share VDE. I think that OCLC has developed yet another work model. It was part of the reason why the LRM, RDA, RDF model was so, or the ontology was so attractive to us, was because, you know, from a cataloger's perspective, when you're using RDA to catalog, or the LRM, or even the metadata guidance documentation for the official RDA, it's very confusing to try to apply that to a data model that doesn't accommodate it. So yeah, I guess I agree with you, Joshua, and it has been interesting to watch. I think that the super work has become the opus. So I don't think the super work is a thing anymore. But the super work and the hubs, or the opus and the hubs, I think the opus is attempting to be an equivalent to the LRM work, and then treating works in BibFrame and in SVDE BibFrame as expressions. But then there's different sort of takes on that because of the Library of Congress. I guess that they're using the hub, and it can refer to works or expressions. So I don't fully understand how it's different from a BibFrame work, other than it can establish relationships between works, which RDA works can do already. So I don't know. There's a lot of conversation to be had about that. And then there was another Question from Lee Yang, do you adopt any automatic mapping method? And yes, well, sort of. We took the mapping that went from RDA to MARC from the RDA registry, and we used Python to sort of switch it around and go in the other direction. And then we populated our initial mappings based on that. So that's as far as our automated mapping has gone.
Yeah, well, it'd be fun to see, you know, because we're using human labor power to analyze everything field by field. And it'd be interesting to see how an automated process would do, like the kinds of things they've been talking about in the discipline of ontology matching for the last 15 years. It'd be nice to see, you know, I don't think we'll have time to go through and do that, but if somebody wants to go through and make a comparison between the results of human labor and machine labor, it'd be pretty fantastic.
So Carrie had to jump off, so I'm filling in by monitoring the Q&A. There's a question here from Zoe Dobbs that says, why do you think a lot of the library world seems to be moving towards RDA and BibFrame rather than an approach like UW's?
That's hard to answer, isn't it? I mean, why? I mean, we'll all have different answers. Why don't we give it a try? I mean, for me, I would just say I try to keep it simple and not get too complicated. And the answer is, I think it's because Library of Congress led the way, and they led the way by having Zafira come and produce BibFrame 1.0. They've been refining BibFrame ever since, and you know, I mean, in some respect, we're all running to the edge of the cliff. You know, somehow. I mean, we're running towards the edge of a cliff too. We're hoping that what's on the other side is good, but we've decided to diverge from the BibFrame crowd and to try and do a testing phase on RDA, LRM, RDF. What I mean, does that correspond with is it just because LC? I mean, does that correspond with what you think?
I think it's because of LC, and also there are vendors who are using it. You know, we're an ex libris library, and so you know, Clarivate and ex libris products, ProQuest, I think maybe, all are using BibFrame in addition to MARC. The BibFrame quality is really it needs work, from ex libris at least, and from the last time that we did data analysis from the Share VDE's version of BibFrame, which was back during LD4P2, that BibFrame was very different from LC's version of BibFrame, and the work clustering needed a lot of work as well. So but I think that those large vendors, that large libraries are sort of subscribing to, have led the way, and you know, people tend to follow that because we work in a shared cataloging environment.
I'm seeing another question here. Oh, did anybody else have anything to add to that last question, or should I read off the next one?
Next one.
Okay. Question from Benjamin. Working through the MARC fields up to this point, has the group had the opportunity to begin discussing best practices for modeling modeling a nomen in RDA/RDF? For example, when to create and model a distinct nomen resource versus providing textual values for attribute elements, or what a minimal description of a nomen might look like.
I think you know the answer to this, Benjamin. Gordon Dunsire actually provided us with sort of a good rule to look at. And it had to do with, you know, things that are RDA entities, such as works, expressions, manifestations, items, agents, time spans, those sorts of things. Things that get their own entity can be described by nomens, but things that aren't an entity shouldn't have nomens. So like a note isn't an entity. I think it is in BibFrame, but in RDA, a note isn't an entity, so it wouldn't get a note, and it just has a label. and it can have multiple labels in different languages, but doesn't have a nomen. So I think that a nomen is an entity where there's an appellation for another RDA entity. And I think Gordon Dunsire might be here. And if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Yeah, once we describe when, it's really a question of when to create a nomen. It's like, do we create a nomen? Do we create an IRI for this as a nomen or not? And once we do that, it's already modeled, right? It's a thing that's already modeled. So we just follow the model that's in RDA. And there's lots of properties that we can use to describe a nomen. Oh, here's Gordon.
Gordon is chiming in to say the motivation is reuse and recycling of metadata sharing. There's another question here from Nick Versteeg. Apologies if I have mangled your name. Are these ontologies a bet that catalogers can invest more time describing individual resources? It seems like the motivation is to capture even more of the world than we already do. Is that a trade-off the profession can make?
These ontologies are not necessarily fully prescriptive. So you don't need to use every single element in the RDA registry. We would create application profiles to accommodate the descriptions that we are already choosing to do. So RDA isn't saying that you need to use all of it. So I really think that like a cataloger looking at an application, maybe an application profile in Sinopia for RDA versus BibFrame, they're probably going to see mostly the same things, except that the labels where it prompts you what to write in how to fill in the blank. Behind the labels for the RDA profile, there's an RDA property that exactly matches the thing that the cataloger is bothering to put in. And in BibFrame, many of those are going to something less specific. And in my mind, that wastes a lot of cataloger time because why are we recording that if it's not going to be computer readable? So yeah, I don't think that we are creating any more description than we would have been in MARC, even if we're cataloging based on RDA.
Yeah, it's inconceivable to think of using RDA without application profiles. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing too. Chris already talked about it when we create resource templates in Sinopia, which can be ported into other platforms. It doesn't have to be used in Sinopia. Yeah, it's inconceivable. We don't, yeah, like Crystal said, we don't have to use the whole ontology.
I'm not seeing any more questions. We have 3 minutes left. Oh, wait, a question, a long one just appeared. I would qualify what was said. This is Laura Ackerman. I would qualify what was said about Ex Libris supporting BibFrame. They're aware there are customers interested in other models. They incorporated the LC MARC to BibFrame transformation tools into Alma. It's more of a comment than a question. I am going to not read the whole thing out loud at you. But thank you, Laura.
Yeah, there's also that, Ex Libris is a Clarivate subsidiary, from what I understand, and OCLC has not been pleased with that practice. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say that I'm hesitant to put faith in the possibility of Ex Libris providing a cataloging editing interface for linked data. It seems up in the air to me right now, like it might not end up happening. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the nature of the situation, but.
Zoe is asking, can you repost to everyone? I'm not sure what that's referring to.
Oh, Laura's comment is to hosts and panelists.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. I should have perhaps. I will cut and paste it. Hopefully, Laura. I assume that Laura will not mind, as she did not object to me reading it out loud. I feel like this happens in every other session. There you go. Okay, so we are at 1 o'clock. Any closing remarks before I stop the live stream? All right. Thank you all for this, and thanks to everybody for coming. Our moderator had to hop off, so I'm not sure what the appropriate closing is. But this was wonderful, and I hope it was that everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. Thanks so much, and thanks for letting me hop in.